In this segment, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the correlational method. This research method attempts to determine the strength of a relationship between two variables, x and y. Suppose we want to know if how many hours someone studies for a test can predict their exam score. What we would do is get a number of participants, usually at least 30 are needed, and we would record how many hours they studied. Please notice that I said hours studied because that's what we know students will do. The scores are then recorded after the exam is completed. If there is a relationship between study time and test scores, we should expect to see, hopefully, a positive correlation, which would mean that the more someone studied for the exam, the higher their exam score. We put this data into a computer and it will give us a correlation coefficient that tells us the nature of the relationship and the strength of the relationship. A positive correlation means that high scores on one variable are linked with high scores on the other. It also means that low scores on one variable are linked with low scores on the other. It means that x and y move in the same direction. The more of one, the more of the other. A negative correlation means that high scores on one variable are linked with low scores on the other variable. Hopefully, for study time and exam score, we don't find a negative correlation. The strength of a correlation can range from -1 to 0 for a negative correlation and 0 to 1 for a positive correlation. The closer the number is to either negative or positive 1, the stronger the correlation. So a correlation of negative 0.8 is stronger than a correlation of positive 0.3. The negative or the positive just tells you what type of correlation it is. So it's not the same as in math where one negative always means less. So closer to -1 or +1 means a stronger relationship between those variables. Now if we go back and look at our data, how come one person who studied 5 hours scored a 90, but another person who studied 5 hours only got an 85? Well, most of us know that there's a lot of other factors involved in how someone does on a test than just how much they study. These factors are called confounding variables. They are other factors that influence our variable of y. They're not ones that we're interested in, but they sort of muddy up the picture. And they often are what really happens in real life. So things like test anxiety or amount of sleep prior to taking an exam can all influence the exam scores. Lastly, when you think about correlations, remember that just because two variables are correlated, it does not prove that one causes the other to happen. For example, ice cream sales and number of drownings are positively correlated. But there's a third factor here that explains the increase for both, and that is summertime. In the summertime, people buy more ice cream, and in the summertime, people swim more, so there's a greater chance of drownings. However, common sense can sometimes suggest the cause. So we will never be able to do an experiment where we randomly assign people to smoke cigarettes or not, but certainly there have been enough correlational studies done through the years that suggest that cigarette smoking is linked to a much greater risk of lung cancer. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation about correlations.